Recording. Perfect. Thank you all for joining this evening. We are really excited to share with you more about City Teaching Alliance as well as the Black Educators Initiative. And so this evening, we'll start with an introduction to our team. The recruitment team will give you an overview of City Teaching Alliance. We'll talk a lot about what the Black Educators Initiative is. So I was excited to see in the chat so many of you are interested in learning more about our initiative. We'll transition to a panel with our current participants and then end with questions and answers. So if you have questions throughout the evening, feel free to hold those or put them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end of our session. So on the next slide, just to introduce you to our team, my name is Jasmine Knowles. I am the managing director of our Black Educators Initiative. I grew up in Orlando, Florida, and started my career as a sixth grade English and social studies teacher in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The majority of my career I've spent in education, and really for me, what brought me to City Teaching Alliance, what brought me to this role is thinking about what I would have wanted to have, not only as a novice or beginning teacher, as I think about the Black Educators Initiative, but also in the support that we provide to our participants, but also what our students deserve to have. And just thinking about the experiences that I had with my first Black teacher when I was in first grade in elementary school, and just the impact that she had on my life. So Haley Boutte is our manager of BEI, and she's not here this evening, but if you are joining our office hours or at other events, you will see her. And we're also joined today by Tiara Fowler, who is our assistant director of BEI. And you'll hear from Tiara a little bit as she's going to be moderating our panel at the end of the evening. In our next slide, I will turn it over to the recruitment team to introduce themselves and to share more about City Teaching Alliance.
Hey everyone, my name is Alan Harris. I'm the recruitment manager here for City Teaching Alliance. I specifically recruit on college campuses. So I look for college seniors and connect with undergrad students for undergrad opportunities we have. I'm excited to meet you all. I'm originally from Boston, Massachusetts. I currently live in Houston, Texas, and excited for you all to learn more about City Teaching Alliance. And I'll pass it to my colleague, Tal.
Appreciate that, Alan. Hey, everyone. Hope you're having a great evening. My name is Tal. I am the Assistant Director of Lead Generation. And so within that role, I focus a lot on our events, partnerships, and campus activator program. I'm really excited to be here tonight. If you can't tell from the energy, I'm a former kindergarten, first and second grade play teacher. I had a classroom filled with toys, game stations, all centered in STEM, literacy, and social emotional development. I was a fifth grade writing teacher and an assistant rugby coach at the high school too. What really brought me to City Teaching Alliance is similar to what Jasmine said. I had only 6 weeks of training before I was in front of 200 students. And I think about our program and the support and development needed for leaders and wish that I had a year working as a resident teacher under a veteran experienced teacher so that I could learn the scaffolding and benchmarks needed to take on the challenges of leading my own classroom. And so that actually ties really well into what we want to talk about, which is City Teaching Alliance and why we were founded and created in the first place. And so our mission is about empowering effective career educators to dismantle and tackle systems of inequity. And we are about empowering educators and transforming futures. So we're going to do a game in the chat real quick. It's a game of over under. And so the way it's going to work is the first question is, underserved schools lose what percentage of their teaching staff each year? Do you think it's over or under 15%? If you think it's over 15%, write over in the chat. If you think it's under 15%, write under. I'm seeing a few overs. Y'all are absolutely right. Underserved schools lose about 20% of their teaching staff each year. And so when we're thinking about turnover and what the effects that have for our students, 1 in 5 teachers need to be addressed for, and that gap needs to be met each year in order to make sure that there are enough quality teachers for our students. We're going to do another one, and you might have already seen this answer, but what percentage of today's teachers believe they have the skills needed to be effective in the classrooms? Do we believe the over under is at 50%? Do we believe over 50% of teachers believe they have the skills needed, or do we think under 50%? Seeing a lot of unders in the chat. Y'all are right on. Only 34% of teachers, so just over 1 in 3 teachers, believe they have the skills needed to be effective in their classrooms. When we look at burnout, we see that burnout is caused not by a lack of passion, but a lack of preparation and having the tools and support needed to excel in the classroom. And then lastly, what percentage of all US K-12 educators identify as Black, Indigenous, or as a person of color? Do we believe at least 30% identify as BIPOC? Over or under? So do we believe it's over 30% or under 30%? Seeing a lot of unders as well. That is absolutely correct. Only 20% of all national public K-12 teachers identify as BIPOC. And then Alan's going to talk about what that meant for us and why we created City Teaching Alliance to try to address some of these data issues.
All right, thank you, Tal. So as you all see, City Teaching Alliance, we were founded in 2009, but we were founded under the name Urban Teachers, and we currently had a rebrand this summer in August. So new colors, new everything, new marketing scheme. Like, we're trying to get ourselves out there because we're really trying to bridge that gap of education inequalities in these cities. So in 2009, Baltimore Public Schools, our founders, Jennifer Green and Christina Hall, they noted, both 20+ year educators, they both noticed that teachers were drastically not prepared to teach in classrooms, especially in underserved communities. Teachers were not reaching their full potential, right? And like my colleague mentioned earlier, right? He started teaching, he only had 6 weeks of teaching, and then he went right into the classroom, right? And how confident do you feel going into a classroom your first year? You never taught before, and you get 6 weeks, and now you got 20, 25 to 30 kids in a classroom, all with different learning styles. You're trying to manage classrooms, but you're not getting the proper training, right? So our founders believe that, this program, this 4-year teaching development, and I'll show you the model a little later, they believe that this is what teachers needed in order to be successful. Constant training and development throughout your teaching career, not just training in the beginning where you get to training and say, all right, go off and do what you got to do. No, we're going to constantly train you. Teachers did not have the skills they need to work with Baltimore public school students is something that they noticed as well. Baltimore public school students, it's Baltimore in the areas we serve, it's an underserved community, right? And kids go through a lot of different experiences, right? We have kids who might see traumatic experiences and they may misbehave in the classroom. We have kids who may have not eaten at night, maybe kids who don't have lights at home, right? And you don't know what they're experiencing. So City Teaching Alliance, we want to build culturally responsive teachers, right? We want culturally responsive teachers who are not just there to teach math, English, and history and science, right? You have to be able to teach the whole child. You have to be able to develop the whole child. So really getting to understand them, getting to know them, understand what's causing, maybe if they're misbehaving, what's causing the misbehaviors, right? Really taking time to really learn your students and be passionate about education. And teachers were burning out at an alarming rate as well, right? So the reason today, right, I live in Houston, and there's hundreds and hundreds of teacher vacancies, which is leading to overpopulated classrooms. And we have almost 30 to 40 students in a classroom in Houston public schools today, in the Houston Independent School District. And what that leads to is and how many, do you think it's possible for one teacher to be able to teach 40 students in a classroom and be able to get to everyone? Everyone has different learning styles. Everyone, has their own different questions. They learn at different paces. It's tough to teach 40 kids, right? But that's due to the teacher vacancies that we have, because teachers are burning out at an alarming rate and they're leaving the profession. So that trifecta led to high rates of turnover, which contributed to school instability, poor parent-teacher relationships, and ultimately negative impact in the students in the classes, right? And when you have a negative impact in the classroom, school is something maybe you're not really interested in school, right? So we want teachers that are really culturally responsive. Our 4-year model that I mentioned before, right? So like I mentioned, right? Tal said he had a 6-week teaching residency. He learned how to teach in 6 weeks and they threw him in the classroom. That's not what we do at City Teaching Alliance. So year 1 is your residency year, right? So it's like a gradual release into lesson planning, co-leading in the classroom with a host teacher. So what you'll do is you'll be placed into a classroom with a veteran teacher, someone who has years of experience as an educator, and you'll learn from them. So you'll learn them, they'll be a mentor to you, you'll kind of watch them, but you'll also, kind of gradually do some different things in the classwork to build your skills and build your experience so you can get that hands-on experience as well. You'll also have a one-on-one coach from City Teaching Alliance who will work with you as well, right? So like I said, you're constantly building up your skills, right? Teaching is not something you learn and then you're good and you're the best teacher in the world, right? It's constant development, it's constant learning and constant adapting to students in different school situations. And also in the year one, you'll also start your master's program, right? So we have a partnership with American University. And it's a 2 years master program where you'll receive your Master's of Arts in Teaching from American University in DC, which is a top 7 school education major program, a top 7 program in the country for education. You'll do majority of your work in that first year when you're not a lead teacher, right? So you're gonna be a student teacher, you're not gonna have to lesson plan, you're not gonna do all that. So majority of your work will be done year one. Year two, you've had that year of training, right? Not the 6 weeks, not the 4 weeks, not the 2 months. You got a year of training under your belt, right? So now this is your first year as a classroom lead teacher. You'll receive a full salary. You'll receive benefits. It varies across different cities that we're located in. I'm sure our BEI team will talk a little bit about that a little later. But you'll also continue to receive one-on-one coaching from City Teaching Alliance as well. And you'll also finish up your master's degree from American University that we talked about. Year three, it's your senior fellow year. It's your second year. You're feeling good now, right? You got a year of training. You got a year of full teaching under your belt. Now you're feeling good, but you still have that one-on-one coach, right? Because it's always some adapting you have to do. There's always ups and downs. So you'll still have that one-on-one coach support that's from your City Teaching Alliance faculty member. And then now this is where you'll earn your certifications as well. So you'll earn either if you want to do elementary or secondary, earn their ESL certification, your English second language certification. All right. And then in year four, that's your alumni year. It's 3rd year as a lead teacher. You're feeling good. You got multiple years of experience under your belt. It's your last year in the program. Now, instead of one-on-one coaching, now you're picking up more additional leadership and mentorship opportunities with City Teaching Alliance. And you'll also have access to our alumni network. And our program started in 2009. A stat for you, 85% of our teachers are still working in education to this day. And then we talked about earlier in this presentation, right, that teacher burnout was at an alarming rate. So it's good to see that 85% of our educators are still working in education to this day. And we started, almost 14 years ago. All right. The communities we serve, Baltimore, Maryland, that's where our headquarters is. That's where we were founded. Dallas, Texas, Philadelphia, which is our newest region, and Washington, D.C. So these are the 4 communities that we serve. We have great teams in all 4 cities, executive directors who are all doing great things and making big changes in all 4 of those cities. So that's a little bit about the program, just a quick overview, and I'll pass it over to our BEI team.
Thank you, Alan. Appreciate that introduction. And so I'm going to speak about our Black Educators Initiative here at City Teaching Alliance. So we can go to the next slide. So the Black Educators Initiative was launched in 2020. And as we talked about the stats at the beginning of our program, we could see, number one, the need for not only having culturally responsive teachers, but as we're thinking about just the need for Black teachers and educators in the classroom, why we needed to increase the numbers of Black educators that we see in the communities that we serve. And so BEI was created to reduce the systemic barriers that many Black educators face as they're entering into the profession. And so this is not a separate program. I think sometimes people have that that question of do I have to apply for BEI? Is this separate? Is there another, application that I have to do and then I can be accepted or not accepted? No, it is part of City Teaching Alliance, and it's an extension of our flagship teacher development program. And so through BEI, we provide financial and programmatic supports. And we really believe that the Black Educators Initiative is something that is a generational movement. This is not something that we're going to have for 1 or 2 years. This is truly something that we are invested in to significantly increase the number of Black educators in the communities that we serve. So you can go to the next slide. And so this is just an overview of what this looks like as we talk about the programmatic support. So we have kind of three tenets and pillars of the Black Educators Initiative. So the first is cultivation. So we're partnering with other organizations to change the narrative. We're identifying our aspiring teachers early. We're thinking about that pipeline to get more teachers into our classrooms. How are we increasing and innovating in our recruitment strategies, and then hosting learning programs, speaker series, and events. In terms of community, in our different sites, we have affinity groups. Bam Bam is one in Dallas. Test prep supports. We also support our participants in attending national and site conferences. In about 2.5 weeks, our Black male educators will be joining and attending the Black male educator convening in Philadelphia, deepening our school and community partnerships, celebrating our culture, as well as new alumni programming. And finally, our commitment. So we have professional development. So Black Girls Teach, or professional development for our Black women, mentoring supports, and addressing systemic barriers through financial and programmatic supports. So on the next slide, many people say, okay, so that talks about the program, but you all say, like, what is the financial support available? So this shows what your financial support would look like over the course of your 4 years in our program. So in your residency year, you will receive a minimum of $1,000 up to $1,250 in a support grant. So again, you're receiving these funds as a support grant to support you in that first year, and then a minimum of $10,000 up to $12,500 in direct tuition payment to American University. So first 2 years that you are in our program, you'll see that there's direct tuition payment and scholarship to American University. And the support grant that we have is across all 4 years of our program. And so our payments are made in these 2 installments, both in the fall and in the spring. And while there is an application that you fill out, that is because our scholarship is dispersed through the UNCF Black Educators Award. But the application is really just to get, like, your bank account information for you to actually complete this again, because it's through a third party. But there's nothing additional that you would have to prove to us. The eligibility requirements are that you identify as Black or African American or multiracial inclusive of Black, that you're making good academic progress at American University, and thirdly, that you are in good standing with City Teaching Alliance for teaching at one of our partner schools. So we will go to the next slide to really talk about, like, what is our goal and why we have the Black Educators Initiative. So again, we talked about at the beginning the long history that we have of preparing diverse educators to lead in our schools, to be culturally responsive, to be rigorously and well prepared. And over the last 5 years, more than 40% of our teacher cohorts have been composed of Black or Latinx individuals. And so we think of that as just the beginning, that it's not where we want to stop. And so again, thinking about how we're recruiting, how we're preparing, how we're retaining our Black educators, and how can we couple that with scholarships, loan forgiveness, and truly infusing supports throughout all of our different components of our program. And then as we think about just our goal, we situate BEI in the context of Black education and build on this legacy that has been left to us by our ancestors and elders. We know that we have a strong history in the Black community of Black educators, truly, as we think back to the Civil Rights Movement, being a force as we think about social justice. And this is something that we are continuing to follow the footsteps behind. So as we think about the case for Black teachers, schooling historically has reproduced these systems of oppression that marginalize Black and Brown children. And so contributing to that, as we think about schooling, it's contributing to the systems of privilege and oppression that perpetuate these inequities and social injustice. And so we believe that Black educators are key change agents in our schools and communities. But as we've talked about, they are underrepresented. And as we think about, like, what does that mean to have representation in front of the classroom, the power of student-teacher match, as we talk about many times, having mirrors, having our students see themselves reflected by someone at the beginning of their classroom. This is really, for us, the power of having Black teachers. And so nationally, only 12% of our public school teachers are Black, and only 2% are Black males. But we believe that by having more diverse and well-prepared educators in these communities, that this creates positive impacts, not just for Black and Brown children, but for all children. And so the research shows that there are improved academic and life outcomes for Black students who are taught by Black teachers. We know that Black teachers have high expectations for Black students. We have an understanding of their life experiences and the culture. And then research shows that there's also fewer disciplinary referrals and that Black teachers can serve as role models for Black male students. So as we combine all of those things, and this is just a snippet of why we are working so hard to increase the numbers and increase the recruitment of our Black teachers and also retaining and keeping them in the sectors, because we truly see the impact that having a Black teacher can have on Black students and all students in our schools. And so I will transition it to Tiara, who will start us with our panel. And again, we're excited that you all are here to learn more about our educators. And so love for you to hear from some of our participants this evening.
Great. Good evening, everyone. My name is Tiara Fowler. I know Jasmine did a quick intro earlier. I'm the Assistant Director of BEI. Former elementary school teacher, taught for a little bit in Dallas-Fort Worth, and then I did some teaching and coaching here in Philly. And so very excited to be working with City Teaching Alliance and the Black Educators Initiative, and really excited to hear from our panelists this evening. And just to make you all aware, we have our three wonderful panelists who are up on the screen, but Jay and Remy actually had some issues come up. So if they're able to hop in here towards the end, they definitely will. But we do have Jamarius here, who I will introduce, and then we will get into some of our panel questions. If you as you're listening to the conversation, if something comes to mind that you want to ask or you're curious about, please go ahead and put that into the chat, and we'll kind of look through those questions so that we can answer them during the Q&A. So please feel free to fire those off in the chat, and then I'm going to get us started. And I'm going to, let me see if I can spotlight myself and Jamarius. Oh. All right. Hi, Jamarius, how are you?
Hi, Tiara. I'm doing pretty good. How you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. So for everyone who is here with us today, Jamarius is a year one fellow in Washington, D.C., and he teaches third grade. So Jamarius, is there anything else that you'd like to share with the audience before we get into some of our questions?
No, I'm just really happy and excited to be here with you guys. So let's get into it.
All right, here we go. And actually, I think we can pause sharing screen for a second, and then hopefully you all can see just us two. All right, here we go. All right, so Jamarius, as a Black educator, can you tell us about the unique challenges and opportunities that you've encountered in your teaching career and how those relate to equity in education?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And so some of the opportunities, I'll go with the optimism first. Some of the opportunities that I've had as a Black educator in the city is to one, I'm not from DC. I'm originally from Charlotte, North Carolina. And so just teaching is completely different, in my opinion. One, from being a student and now as a teacher in a progressive city like DC, in a progressive program like this, I've really had the opportunity to learn a lot of really good and best practices when it comes to teaching kids. And I've been able to really mesh that into what it looks like to be a Black human being and be a Black person experiencing the world, but also being able to really translate the content to kids in a way, translate the content to Black kids in a way that really makes the learning fun for them. It gives them an opportunity to see themselves in the curriculum. It gives them an opportunity to let their light shine, to not have to code switch as much as we were trained and we were taught to do in school. And so that opportunity has been really great to just see so many of my kids who I was told like, oh, they're a slow learner, or oh, like they're not as easily motivated. And this year that hasn't been the case. That hasn't been my experience with them. But with that, some of the challenges are when you do have a curriculum and you're a little pressed on time, you don't always have that time to go through and make those intentional changes to be that cultural relevant teacher. And sometimes that really does take a hit on the lesson, but again, being a Black presence for those students is another opportunity that makes it all worthwhile. Another challenge is just the fact that there isn't, at least for me, I work in a charter school here in DC, and so it's a really diverse school. We're a really smaller school compared to other public schools in the area. But because of that, there isn't a lot of us in that space. So while the kids are really diverse, you have a lot of diversity among the staff, but when you look at the instructional staff, I am the only Black male educator in my building. And we are a pre-K 3 to an 8 school. So from middle school, lower school, and early childhood, I am the only Black male lead teacher in that space. And so carrying that around, while, you know, we appreciate all of our other Black men, we appreciate all the other Black staff, but being a Black male, what does that mean for young Black men to see me in that space and show up as someone who cares about academics? What does it mean for the little Black girls who are looking for someone to look up to, looking for someone to give them a hug, to hold their hand, to walk with them, and to allow them to experience life without having to always look over their shoulder and be so fearful of anyone who comes into their life? Because being in this urban setting, these are some of the narratives that kids are facing. And so that is a challenge, because it's only one of me and there's 500 of them. And I want to give all my love to all of them, but I can't. So it's really, the challenge is finding ways to be intentional with the kids, even in middle school and early childhood, and being that presence at my school building.
Yeah, thank you for that. You hit on a lot of really important points, you know, just thinking about, you know, you are this only Black man on the instructional staff in your school, and like, what does that mean for your students? But also, you know, what does that mean? What does that mean for you, and how you're navigating that context, and helping your students to also see what it looks like to navigate being, you know, a Black or brown person in the room. So I really appreciate that, and I really appreciate you speaking to ignoring the narrative, right? And so I think we come into education and we hear like what our students are supposed to be like, and it can be really hard to work through that, because we hear it all the time in the media from other people, you know. And so I really appreciate just naming that, you know, it's a real thing, and it was very insightful. So thank you. I'm going to move us on to the next question. And you started to talk about this a little bit, as I heard you talk about your background, you're being from the South, and you're here in DC, which is a much more diverse city. So as Black educators, we often share a lot of identity markers and experiences with our students. But the Black experience is not monolithic, right? We know we're not going to have the same exact backgrounds as our kids, even though we share that racial identity marker. So in what ways have you been pushed to think about the uniqueness of the experiences of the students that you serve?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And as y'all can see, I left coursework a little bit early so I could be here with y'all. So I'm still at American. For those who are ready to come dive into this work, this is what it will look like when you're in this space. But we were literally just talking about that upstairs, because 2 of us in my cohort are from Charlotte, ironically, and the students that my friend taught last year transferred to my school. So we were just talking about the difference of just like, you know, one thing is religion, right? In the South, to be Black is to be Christian. You don't really question that. But here, there are a lot of different Blackness that shows up in religion. And that's something that was new for me to experience, because being in the South, again, you don't really question a lot of things. But I've had kids who come up to me and be like, you're not Muslim? And I'm like, no, I'm actually Christian. And they're like, what? That's crazy. And just being able to have that dialogue with them, because for me, I'm like, what? You're Muslim? Like, that's crazy. Like, we don't experience that. And being able to really use that as a like learning opportunity for both of us, and being able to like show the kids, hey, I'm not an expert on everything. I know a lot of something, and what I do know, I share with you. But like, I'm not an expert on everything. And so just because we look the same doesn't mean we operate the same. Just because we look the same doesn't mean we come from the same neighborhoods. Just because we look the same doesn't mean we experience life the same. And so I really try my best within the classroom to give kids the opportunity to share who they are. and not to label them, not to further push them into a box because we look alike. I know your story, so I automatically know what you need. I automatically know what you're going to struggle with. I know you're not going to like math. And when you force kids into those boxes, you tend to see all of those stereotypes that you just put on them. And so when you allow kids to really just blossom, when you allow kids to come into who they are for who they are, you take like the lens, almost like the racial lens off and just say, we're all people who are different. How can we create a productive class community where we highlight everyone's differences and not highlighting them to say that one is wrong, but to highlight them to learn why we are different and why that makes us all unique and why we should learn to be a community, why we should learn to cohabitate together, because in the world, you're going to work with people who don't look like you at all. You're going to work with people who don't look like you when you have more things in common with them. But if you never got past that racial boundary, if you never got past the, let me actually get to know you as a person, then you'll never actually understand the beauty of all the world that we live in.
Yes, and I'm over here nodding my head and making mm-hms. You can't hear me, but I really appreciate all that you are saying there. I think, sometimes we don't realize that a lot of what we bring into the classroom is new for our students too. And so I think being open about our backgrounds and our experiences, as much as is appropriate in the classroom. But I heard you say you're not the expert, right? So figuring everything out with each other, the teacher with the students, and they're learning about their background and oh, you look like me, but this other thing happened to you, okay, cool. And really encouraging students to be curious and to make those connections, and also realize that Black people are not all the same, and you're going to leave here and you're going to go places and you're going to, have those connections and those experiences that they've learned from you and the other adults that they've interacted with. So you're at American University. And we know that getting your master's program is one of the really wonderful parts about our program at City Teaching Alliance. And so as a fellow year one, you are balancing a lot between teaching and being coached and being at American University. But through all of those things, you're still learning how to be an anti-racist educator and really be a proponent of equity. So looking back, what are some things that you wish you had known before starting the program with City Teaching Alliance that could have better prepared you for your role as an equity champion in education?
Wow, that is a really good question. That's a really good question, because as I'm reflecting on my experience, the one thing that I've really realized in this fellow year is that I owe time a lot. She got me in debt for a lot of things. And I keep giving more and more and more of my time away. And so one thing that I would have wished I knew when I started the program is really how to set those boundaries with people. Like academic boundaries, professional boundaries, personal boundaries. Because I found myself in a lot of scenarios this year where I've had to be like, hey, no, I told you I could do something, but now that I'm actually planning out my schedule, now that I'm looking at things, I can't do that. And so for me, one of my biggest regrets is not being able to plan ahead. And not with teaching, you plan ahead all the time, but your personal life tends to take a backseat because you care so much about the kids. You care so much about your coursework. You care so much about wanting to make sure that you're performing. There are a lot of people, there are a lot of resources that have put time, money, energy into investing in you. And so you want to make sure that you're keeping up with the expectations that they have for you, while also making sure you're taking care of yourself. And so that large piece of setting those boundaries with people is because I needed to set some boundaries with myself to say, hey, at 10 o'clock tonight, I'm cutting off work. And if I didn't get it done, I'm just going to communicate with somebody that I didn't do it, because I'd rather get sleep tonight to make sure I'm best prepared for my kids tomorrow. Sometimes that looks like looking at my supervisors and saying, hey, I'm going to be late on a deadline. And it's not because I don't want to do it. Sometimes I just need to self-care and make sure that when I'm coming to a lesson, I'm putting my first foot forward so I can be culturally relevant, so I can actually make intentional instructional decisions so that the kids are learning what they need and not what society is telling them that they need to learn. And what that has taught me is that a lot of people will respect you when you do put boundaries up, because if you don't, they'll think you're just extendable. They'll think you never break. They'll think you can just bend and bend and bend. But in this profession, you have to learn how to advocate for yourself first before you can advocate for kids. It's like when you're on the airplane and they're like, oh, if the oxygen mask come down, put yours on first before you put one on the kid. And my mom was always like, I will always put yours on first. I'm a mother first. And I think that's the way a lot of educators look at teaching. They look at it as, well, let me go ahead and put out this argument before I go eat my lunch with the kids. Let me make sure that I have all this together. Let me do a lunch bunch with 5 kids, even though my mental is not here today. Let me continue to put myself on the line without caring for myself first. And that's not caring for your kids, because then when you're upset, when you're hangry, and I taught my kids what that word means so that they remind me to eat lunch, because I was putting them before my food. But you have to really, really make sure that you are setting boundaries with yourself, because if you don't, then you will burn out very quick in this program, because there are a lot of requirements, there are a lot of demands, but it's a lot of hard work that goes into this, like, a lot of passion work, a lot of kids who are depending on you. And like I said, I'm the only Black man at my site. So if I'm really not setting boundaries with myself, with the kids, with the school, with AU, then I'm not doing what's right for kids, because I'm teaching them that you can always just let people use you and use you and use you, and never take the time to make sure you're well for yourself. So I wish I would have learned how to set those boundaries, because my resident year, I did overextend myself on a lot of things that I didn't have any business doing. It paid off in the long run, but if you don't have to put yourself through stressors like that, don't, because your fair share will come.
Take a breath. That was a lot, right? And that's real. It is so easy to try to do every little thing, but you can't do every little thing and still be the best educator, an educator who is a proponent of equity, an educator who is doing what is right by kids, because what is doing right by kids is also taking care of you, right? And what I don't hear you saying is like, I'm not going to do that paper, I'm not going to do this, I'm gonna just ignore it. That's not what you're saying, right? You're talking about like communicating what is going on and still holding those boundaries firm, but still getting to do what it is that you need to do, but like prioritizing, right, is what I'm hearing. So and that's going to lead us in kind of to my next question, which is, what specific aspects of the program have been most impactful in your journey toward championing equity in education? So that could be like a coach or AU. What has that been for you? What's been most impactful?
Yeah, the coach would have been my first answer, but I actually think that what's been most impactful is being in the classroom and having coursework. Now, let me be very frank when I say, do I always approach coursework at the end of a long teaching day with optimism and a smile on my face? Absolutely not. I am human. But I will say that there have been a lot of times that in class, when you're with all these educators who are at all these different schools doing a lot of different things, to see that it's not just my kids who are struggling with writing, and to hear how Mr. Ivy's kids are doing, and to hear some of the things that are going on and some of the practices that other cohort members are doing, has been really impactful. To be teaching writing development, and then to be in the course that's about teaching writers, or teaching developing writers. So it's like, as I'm trying to figure this thing out for myself, because a part of my background is before I got into the program, I was a middle school summer school teacher who taught English reading and writing for Freedom Schools in Charlotte. So I've worked with kids all across the board in my 11 years of working with kids, but I've never taught this age group of kids before. So like, I'm teaching kids who have some kind of an idea in 6th grade of how to write a sentence. My job is to just help them tune that up and make sure that they're extending their learning. But to teach a child how to write a sentence, I'm like, I don't know how to further break this down for you, because you just write left to right, put a period at the end, and make a capital letter. But that's not how kids learn. And so to be in the class that taught me how to take it slow, to be in the class that made me feel like how my kids are in class, made me a little bit more compassionate of my learning environment when I was teaching, to say, hey, I know you're frustrated, because I was frustrated when I went to class last night. And I tell my kids these stories. We had to do this assignment. I did not have enough time, but I kept pushing, because you always want to make sure that you're modeling how your kids can get through things. And so to be in coursework that's really aligned with what you are teaching the kids, what is going on in the school day, and then you go to class at night, and some of your assignments are to look at your kids' data and grade them. And it's like, wow, I'm checking 2 things off my box because I did need to grade these papers, and I was just going to do it on Sunday night, along with all the other Sunday night things that have to go on with the teacher's life. But now that I'm here, I can ask questions. I can ask my professor, well, what should I even be looking for when grading their assignments? Because again, I've not worked with this age group before, but that doesn't mean I can't do it. It just means, you need the skill set and you need the support. So having the coursework align with what is going on in the school has been really, really, really helpful.
Yeah, and the program that you're in really matters, and the classes that you're in really matter, because you're talking about really sitting in the seat of your students so that you can understand how to better teach them. And that's not something that you're gonna get, that you're not gonna get everywhere. And I think, especially, you didn't talk specifically about this, but I think, as a resident, you're not a full-time classroom teacher just yet, but you're still learning, like, how am I going to teach my students once I am the teacher of record, when I get in front of them, and you already have, it is very different when it is you, but you already have some skills in your back pocket once you get in there in the following year.
Yeah.
Go ahead, were you going to say something?
No, I was just agreeing with you.
Oh. So I have 2 more questions for you, and then we will get to our Q&A. I saw some questions coming in the chat. So just we're going to transition now to kind of thinking about, like, what are your future aspirations? And so it looks very different for a lot of people. Personally, I thought I was going to be in the classroom forever. I was like, I don't see what people can possibly do outside of the classroom. And I really enjoyed my time as an elementary school teacher, but that's not the case for everyone. I know people who have been in the classroom 10, 15 years, and that's okay too. So for you, what are your future aspirations in championing equity in education, both within your school as well as in the broader education community?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And similar to you, before I started this program, I was like, oh, once I'm in the classroom, I'm set into retirement because I love working with kids. But now that I'm here, and I think a lot of you guys will experience when you are in the program, you get into education, and as a student, you kind of have an idea, but like the folks used to tell us back in the day, wait till you get a little older. And now that I'm a little older and I work in education, you just see a lot of the gaps. You see a lot of the inconsistencies that happen in the same environment, on the same hallway. And so for me, I think my journey in education will look like, really getting a good grips of how to make a classroom work, how to make a classroom loving, how to make a classroom warm, how to make a classroom inviting, and then how to really let the kids be the agents in the classroom while also teaching them how to be that. Because I think a lot of schools right now, they want kids to advocate, have student voice, have student choice, but we're not preparing them to use that correctly. And so we have a lot of kids who don't know how to collaborate. They don't want to work well. You tell them, hey, I want you to write this assignment, and they say, hey, I'm going to draw it. And then because we're not really holding them accountable, they use their student voice, they use their student choice like we wanted them to, but it was out of context. And so I think once I am able to get a good, well-rounded viewpoint of how to make a classroom really learning productive, and how to make it a community, my impact will further to help other teachers make their classrooms like that. Because, working in a school, your classroom magic is all based on who you are as a person. And it's really hard to replicate what one person does. It's really hard to, I work with Miss Mallett. Me and her work at the same school. Miss Mallett is a phenomenal educator. And while Miss Mallett is a phenomenal educator, I can do everything Miss Mallett does with the same students, and it will not work for me because I'm not Miss Mallett. And so it's really about raising teachers and helping teachers see where who they are in the classroom and how that shows up for their kids, and to leverage that with the relationship that you're able to build, because that's what makes a classroom work, is when you're able to correct kids out of love. And I tell my kids right now, it's because I love you that I'm letting y'all know that your behavior is not okay. So we're going to get that together, because if I didn't love you, I would let you just go out here and do whatever you want to do, and be whoever you want to be. But because I love you, I'm going to let you know that, there are a lot of people right now trying to be in the NBA. And while you do have the skill set, sometimes your jump shot in my trash can doesn't make it. So do you think you want to put all your eggs in that basket? And having that real conversation with kids, because when they are 18 and now they have to pivot in their life, I want them to be able to say, oh, Mr. Mooney told me that I can be anything I want to be. So if I'm not going to be a basketball player, I can be this. And so it's really like helping teachers make those connections with the kids, helping other teachers really like, you know, teaching is about their academics, but it's about raising the whole child. It's about making the village happen for the parents, for you, for the kids, so that these kids go off in life and they be everything that we want them to be. Because we say that the kids are the future, but some of the kids that we work with right now, you would not want to be in charge, but what can you do about that when you're in the classroom? And sometimes that looks like stopping your lesson to say, hey, I know right now you need to learn your multiplication factor, but if you don't get it from me, you'll get it from somebody else. But I'm going to make sure you know how to act. I'm going to make sure you know how to be a learner, because if you don't, you won't get any of this, and we'll continue to be in this cycle. So really making sure that other teachers know how to do that in their own voice, in their own power, and with their own students, because again, we all work with different age groups. So what that looks like for everybody is different. Who I was as a sixth grade English teacher is a lot different than who I am as a third grade all subjects teacher. And so just allowing teachers to find themselves so that they make those classrooms work for them as well, so that we can make sure all of our kids are being the human beings that we want them to be.
Yeah, I heard a lot there. So authenticity in the classroom, right? You have to show up as you. You can't show up as another teacher. I've also tried it. It doesn't work. They don't respond the same way, and kids know immediately, like, nah, that's fake. We're not about that, right? So I appreciate you naming that. And also part of what I'm hearing you say is that like you have these other future aspirations in education that might not necessarily be as a classroom teacher, but in order to do that other job, you need this solid foundation of like, how do I become a great classroom teacher over the course of these 4 years in order to have this larger influence in the education community. Yeah, and it's hard work. It's hard work. So I'm gonna leave us with this last question, and I know there are a few questions that some of our folks have here tonight. So for me, the last question will be, the field of education, it has its challenges, especially as a Black educator. But we know that Black students, they feel the impact of having a Black teacher who looks like them, who shares their experiences, who they're able to really connect with. And with that said, some people, they have their doubts. Like, I don't know if education is really right for me. Like, look at what's going on right now. So what would you say to prospective Black candidates who are considering joining City Teaching Alliance, but might be on the fence for one reason or another?
That's a good question too. So yes, this is a career and a passion work. And so what I would say for Black educators who want to join this initiative and who want to join this movement is to, before you sign up for it, to really, really, really understand what's at stake. And not to like scare people away from the field, but like these are children's lives that we're dealing with. And so while that is a very, nerve-wracking thing to do, it's also a very honoring thing to do, because there are a lot of people in your life that you'll find out who will say, I never want to be a teacher. I could not deal with kids. So the fact that you are even questioning signing up for this work should let you know that you have what it takes to be an educator doing this hard work. And so if you're going to sign up for this work, be ready to show up authentically as yourself every day. Do not let what schooling and what school environment, what they want for you in your classroom dictate who you are as an educator. Because like you were saying, the moment you lose your authenticity is the moment your classroom does not work. It's the moment that you'll figure out, or you'll find that things just feel a little bit more chaotic. But the moment you ground yourself in who you are, why you are doing this work, remembering your why, I believe that is what keeps me going, is to know that, even on my hardest days, I want my kids to know that you can persevere through anything. You can do anything you put your mind to. And even when you make a mistake, if you're doing things right, someone will be there to help you get up and walk with you along the way. So if you're going to sign up to be this work, be that person to hold their hand, because their parents are there. Of course, they know they can depend on their parents, but it really does take a village to make sure that kids are healthy, to make sure kids are happy, to make sure that they're whole, to make sure that they have everything in their tool belt, to be successful when they become an adult. Because that's really that's what childhood is to prepare you to be an adult. And the one question I will leave you with that is, at this current moment, do you believe that the education system is preparing kids to be adults? Not kids who can pass a test, not kids who know how to cheat a test, but kids who actually can come and count your money for you, to be your banker, to be the person that you go to when you're bleeding and you don't know why, and they need to cut you open. And if you don't trust the kids right now to do that for you, then that's why you should sign up to do this work, because I know that my kids are going to be able to do anything that they put their mind to, because I've been their teacher. And I tell them, I'm not your teacher just for right now. I'm your teacher for right now, but I'm also your influencer for life. And if you ever need anything, you know where to come find me, because kids need to know that they have other people outside of their family who love them, because that is what makes the impact. That is what keeps me going back every day. It's because when you walk down the hallway and you're your authentic self, you're going to get 15 kids who aren't even yours, who you don't even know, to say good morning to you. And that lets you know you're doing it right, because you need to be that presence.
Yeah, take the commitment, take it seriously. And it's not an easy job. It's never going to be an easy job. But if you want to come do this, like you're saying, like, you have to be committed to do it, think long and hard about it, because these are kids' lives, right? So Jamarius, thank you so much. I know we talked for a little while. I really appreciate all of that insight that you gave. And I know that we have a few minutes left for Q&A, and I know recruitment wants to tell us a little bit more. But again, thank you so much. And let's see. And yet what you said at the end, teacher for life. Philly is small. I see old students all the time, and they're like, miss this, miss that, and like that impact, it lasts.
Kiara, as you're looking at questions, there was one that I can quickly answer, and then we can turn it back over to this. So there was a question about what advice we would give to someone who might be interested in the program, but is not feeling confident in their knowledge of Black history as someone who's an African immigrant. And I think this actually kind of speaks to what Jamarius was saying earlier, right? That even that you, Tiara, the Black experience is not monolithic, right? So even if you are Black American, there are things that you don't know about the Black experience in Philly, DC, that like each of our cities has like a different history as well. But I think that for this person who asked this, I think you're already starting to get at what you like, to just be curious, and like you understand that there is some knowledge that you need to have. And so I would recommend doing a lot of reading. There are a lot of great books out there from Black educators who talk about what Black history is, or what this means for the history of our students in schools. And so I will put some recs in the chat from some authors that you should look into, who are like Black educators, who you might be able to learn some things about just education in our schools and for Black students. And so then I will transition to here. I think there might have been another question there for Jamarius.
See, thank you, Jasmine. That was helpful. And the only other thing I'll add in is not even every Black American knows all of the history of what has happened in this country. So please do not let that be the deciding factor of whether or not you can be the teacher who steps in front of Black American children. Okay. How do you cope, Jamarius, with having to work harder than your white counterparts? How do you handle that stress?
That's a really good question. And I'm gonna say this, and I will promise you, I'm not trying to be cocky, but I refuse to work as hard as they do. And I say that because being a Black educator is different. Kids, I don't want to say automatically respect me, but a lot of the raising that we have in our community, we don't have to work as hard to get kids to be as engaged, because who we are is engaging. Showing up authentically every day. Teaching is easy for me. It's all the other demands of education that's frustrating. It's the deadlines about the report card comments, or you know, as much as we love parents, having to schedule 25 different parent-teacher conferences is a lot on top of making sure that your classroom environment is great. And so if you feel like you're having to work as hard to keep up with your white counterparts, my question for you would be, why do you feel like you have to keep up with them? Because that goes further. And I love the school that I work at for this, because they really try their best to make it very inclusive for everyone, while understanding, like, we don't have a professional dress code because they do not want us to conform to the white supremacist standards of what professionalism looks like. And so if one teacher is doing one thing, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to do it. You have to do what's best for you and what works for you. And so with me, that coping looks like having great relationships with the kids, because I put them to work. And my coach told me that you don't need to own everything in your classroom. And I found that a lot of teachers, especially white teachers who are working with Black kids, they have to control everything because they don't really understand. They don't always understand the perspective that Black kids bring into the classroom. And that's why they have to work harder, or it looks like they're working hard, to make their classroom engaging, to make their classroom more welcoming, because they're trying to bridge that gap that we automatically have because we look like the kids. And then because Black kids who've been in the class with these other white students, because they're like, for once, oh my God, I love this teacher, let me sit down and listen. The white kids fall in line. So that's not even a worry for you either. So all that to say, handling stress, make sure you have a good support system to lean on. Make sure you have really good people around you who want to see you do well. Make sure you set those boundaries with yourself, with your school, with your personal life, your whatever you got going on. But also know that if somebody's working hard to get by, look at what they're doing, but don't replicate what they're doing, because you don't have to work that hard to be engaging. You just got to make sure your kids are learning, your kids are in tune with what you have going on. Because even if you don't know the content well, use the kids experts, use what they know. Because I don't know everything. And these kids here, being from the South, we weren't taught the American Revolution as in depth as they want you to teach it as an educator. So a lot of times the kids know more about that than I do, but I'm still their teacher. But what I do is I'm intentional about how we have conversations, so that the things I don't know that they do know, I let them be the experts in, and I'm the expert in what I do know. So again, that's not me working harder. It's using everything around me to make learning fun for the kids, so that I don't feel the pressure to do that all by myself.
Thank you, Jamarius. I wish we could sit here and keep talking, and we might have to like have another side conversation after this and keep talking. We are just at time, and we do want to make sure that I saw some questions in the chat about applying and other things. So we do want to make sure that we share the ways that you can continue to connect with us. So Jamarius, I'm going to send you a chat message really quickly, but thank you so much for your time. And then I'm going to pass it over to, it might be Alan, might be.
Yeah, we can jump in.
Oh.
Jamarius, thank you so much for sharing your perspective. Like, truly found that such an energizing conversation, and am just so grateful to just hear more of your perspective and your experience in the classroom and with City Teaching Alliance. We want to make sure this continues. And so if you're interested in registering for office hours, you can scan that QR code below. Haley is incredible and would love to connect with you. There is another deadline in the spring. So if you're feeling 2 weeks from now is a little bit too short, totally understand. What we're really going to encourage is that y'all follow up with us, and we'll have that available in one moment. But real quick, thank you, Jasmine, for putting in the link for our BEI office hours. And then what I want to also encourage y'all is to meet with Alan or myself. If you're an international student or a first or second year college student, scan my QR code. I'd love to connect with opportunities on and off campus. But if you're interested in our post-grad opportunity, as if you're a senior or if you've already graduated, make sure to scan Alan's QR code and we'd love to meet with you. We're also going to put our link in the chat. And then lastly, for folks who are ready to apply now, here is the link for you to get started on your application. We will then be in touch once you register to make sure you're fully supported throughout this process. And so let me share my screen one more time. But that concludes our presentation for today. Again, Alan and I would love to meet with you. I want to once more thank our BEI team for leading this, for hosting this space, and for allowing Jamiris to be able to share his perspective. And again, just thank you so much for being here. Before we officially close out, I'm going to pass it to Tiara and Jasmine to share any last closing thoughts or sentiments.
Thanks so much,
Uh,
Tall and Alan.
Go ahead.
Oh, good.
But I was gonna
just-
say Jamarius put his info in the chat. If anybody wants to follow him, I'm gonna go follow him. You all should go follow him.
Perfect. And thank you all for joining. I hope that you are excited to apply for a City Teaching Alliance and to think about your future and what you can do to impact the lives of Black and all students across our cities. And so excited. Again, if you want to learn more, we have our office hours and that's in the chat. But thank you all for joining tonight and hope that everyone has a good evening.
Thanks, everyone.
And lastly, I'm just putting in the chat some resources that includes books, websites, and videos that talk more about an intersectional approach to social justice in our classrooms. And so that's a little bit of what Jasmine was talking about. And we're going to have some more books and readings, but wanted to make sure that you all had this resource as well. Thank you so much for being here. Y'all have a great day.